Stithi Prakarana, the Sustenance, Chapter 5, the Song of Kacha. The air carries a pleasant smell of moist earth mixed with that of the leaves of different plants, some of whom are known to have the medicinal qualities. The deer, the bison, and a variety of other animals abound this place. And the place is known as Pakhal, named after a crystal clear lake. A wildlife sanctuary is attached to it. The lake and the sanctuary are in the Telangana region of Andhra Pradesh, about 70 kilometers from a town known as Warangal. Like such places that are protected from the exploitation of human beings, it has an ethereal beauty. One feels as though one is on a different planet. A thick forest cover, the crystal clear lake, the wildlife and a variety of feathered friends abounding it make it an ideal place for a retreat. In that sylvan area of several square kilometers, there are only two buildings, separated at least 500 by 500 meters, and are maintained by the departments of public works and the forests. The approach to this scenic place is delightful, as the crowded and the stifling civilization gives way gradually to the wild nature as one leaves the towns to pass through villages and hamlets. The road is lined with thick shady trees, the green paddy fields, and the rural innocence on both of its sides. As one enters this reserved forest, one feels protected and safe. It can also be called as a sacred grove, as there is a wide variety of botanical species which have become extinct elsewhere. Because the people have abstained from cutting any tree or killing any animal, there is an atmosphere of fearlessness created by the flora and the fauna. In forests, one is always vulnerable to many dangers, but much less than one who is used to the civilized ways can ever imagine. There is a rough terrain with all its thorns, insects, snakes, and animals that definitely follow the rules of their own, of which we may not be aware. And one of the most dangerous things is the mire of the quicksand. The caretakers of the inspection bungalows warn the visitors not to venture too near the lake, as there are some dangerous spots where many lives have been lost. They tell the visitors that even if one were to accidentally venture into the quicksand, the first thing they should avoid is panic. For it is the panic that makes us restless and forces us to make unnecessary effort, which only takes us deeper into the mire. If the victim keeps still, then the others can make efforts to bring him out. Something similar happens to the one in the samsara, but with a big basic difference. That is, most of us are unaware of the mire of involvement that entangles us to the world. Consequently, we are totally oblivious to the dangers. And the one who has realized that he or she has been enveloped by the mire and that happiness is only the reverse of misery, panic is the first thing that should be avoided. By panic, what is meant is the hurry to transcend the mire of involvement. This hurry or speed to achieve the freedom takes us towards intense mental activity, because this hurry happens to be yet another desire. The more we nurture any desire, the deeper do we get into the mire. It must be accepted that the contemporary trend governing humanity is the goal orientation. Everything, our education, entertainment, as well as our social system, is governed by goals. The main role of education seems to be to infect us with this ambition. Everything else is secondary. This is necessary or maybe even mandatory for survival in the world. And without any goal, one tends to stagnate at the tamasic level as it has happened in our country. Most of us are incorrigibly lethargic, and others are yet to overcome the slavish mentality which is dominated by jealousy. Due to this avoidable emotion, most of us are involved in leg pulling politics, even in the scientific level. And we are still lagging behind in the field of science and technology in spite of our talent. Goals have a very important role of enthusing us towards action from lethargy, from complacency to efficient proficiency. Goal is a bridge which takes us from animalistic existence to the human level, making us aware of a life which is more than mere survival. For instance, let us consider the case of one who wants to build a house or a huge bank balance. For him, the house and the bank balance has become the goal. Consequently, the ego starts missing the goal and does not rest till the goal is fulfilled. It thus creates restlessness to achieve them. One strengthens one's will and plans all the methods of acquiring them. In other words, the ego and the path are created by the goal. This is how the bridge of goal works to enthuse us to activity at the level of survival. Even at the psychological level, the goal of knowledge helps us in the better understanding of life when one discovers a deeper dimension to life than mere survival. Certain values like inner and self-discipline enter our life. The search for a meaning and purpose of life enter the consciousness. With this inquiry, necessarily one develops distaste and a disinterest towards the basic urges like hunger and procreation. One becomes a seeker of truth. Up to a certain stage of this inner journey, the goad of goal is useful. It gives a direction to the wayward life, brings in trust and devotion. However, goal is only a bridge, and if we make it our home, misery is inevitable. We definitely have to make use of it at the grosser level, but should not continue to hang on to it at the subtler levels. And if the goal becomes powerful, the ego too becomes equally powerful, if not more powerful. That is how fear and greed have been used by the organized religions to control the society. They have made even God into a goal. It is very obvious that every goal only nurtures the ego while creating the path for its achievement. By its very nature, goal is subordinate to ego, as goal is achieved by the ego. And if God is made into a goal, then the achiever is superior to God, which can never be. In the path of devotion, it is said that the devotee can never meet the divine because the devotee's presence itself proves that the ego is still present. The moment ego melts into nothingness, only then God becomes a reality. Ego is the only barrier hindering the God experience. That is why at this level, the goal happens to be the greatest hurdle. This is precisely the reason why certain spiritual traditions like Zen insist on calling their path as the goalless path or the gateless gate. There is another dimension to this. The thought I am gets nurtured with every activity. Greater the achievement, more vehement and strong is this declaration, and with this declaration, there is a pseudo-satisfaction of being somebody. Paradoxically, with every brick to this mansion of I am, a story is being added to the multi-storied building of fear. Because one sees death everywhere and at every step. It is observed that whether it is a great man or an ordinary man, he has to part with this world someday. With this observation, the man of achievement, who is necessarily more observant and indulgent, gets a parallel thought that I may not be. And to combat this fear, he further gets involved in activity to bloat his ego. Thus, he gets involved in a vicious circle of ego followed by fear, which in turn is accompanied by ego. As one succeeds in dropping the ego, the fear automatically vanishes. This point is being repeatedly stressed because, along with the idea of goal, the concept of time enters. With time are born desire, speed, activity, worry, and other manifestations of the heightened activity of the mind. This sarga starts with a suggestion to Rama by sage Vasishta that one should be devoid of any desire or volition, that one should be like beautiful gem emitting a dazzling radiance without any volition on its part. If the gem is kept on a red cloth, it becomes red. On a green cloth, green, and so on. In the absence of desire and volition, there can be no idea of kartrutva or the doership. Another way is to identify oneself with the universe and to see the universe as the kartru or doer. And the third way is not to identify with either the universe or the individual, but with that reality which is transcendent. These are the three ways in which one can vanquish the ever-growing mind. One should try to choose any one of these three methods and transcend the limitations of the mind. To understand these three methods, one requires a little background. The activity of mind exists through the relationship between the individual and the world of objects, taking the comprehensive interpretation of an object to be anything that is held by the mind for continuing its activity. This relationship is effected through what has been called by the Vedanta as Triputi, the joining triplex or the three joiners: the object, the experiencing, and the subject, the seen, the seeing, and the seer, the knowledge, the process of knowing, and the knower, or the content, the act of cognizing, and the consciousness. For most of us, these three joiners are all intermingled and are in a state of a kind of homogeneity where there is no distinction. This is because of the speed of mind due to desires. Only when the mind is slow can one differentiate between the object and the subject, the seer and the seen. But the process of joining is still not discernible as it is the subtlest. Some Vedantins call this as Guptam or the hidden. Just as the river Saraswati is hidden in the Triveni Sangam or the confluence of the three rivers of Ganga, Yamuna, and Saraswati. The cognition or the relationship with the world or the activity called the mind is not possible even if one of these is absent. The spiritual paths for transcending the activity of mind try to handle any one of the Triputi or the three joiners. The first method recommends that one should eschew the kartrutva or the doership while performing the action. This suggests the changing of content by the consciousness without any involvement or indulgence with the consciousness. For instance, if one sees a man suffering, one tries to alleviate his suffering without any expectation in return. This has been called as the Nishkama Karma, the action without any desire or any consideration for any gain. A question arises as to how is it possible to perform such action, as most of our actions are result oriented, and that too such results which are beneficial to us. Even in such actions, there is a motivation. Only the motivation is not material, but the poise of the consciousness. Reverting back to the same example, the suffering man creates a painful vibration in the consciousness, and by the outward action of lending a helping hand, one is brought back to the condition of poise. That is, the outward situation is changed for changing the reactions in the consciousness. Through this method, one is freed from the binding effect of all actions. Here, action or volition is used to transcend action. This method has been called as Karma Yoga, where freedom is the goal. In this, the attraction for the material result of action is given up. The second method suggested by the sage is that which involves the change of consciousness and not the content. One does not change the content, the world of objects, but sees it as it is. One acquires the clarity of vision to behold the truth through this method. While observing the world, the consciousness reacts positively or negatively. One just observes these reactions in the consciousness. J. Krishnamurti used to say that one has to listen to the desire as you listen to the wind amongst the trees. To repeat it again, listen to the desire as you listen to the wind amongst the trees. In this method, one makes use of the content, that is, the world and the reactions of the mind, to attain the clarity of the consciousness. Here, knowledge or understanding is made use of to transcend the mind. This is known as Jnana Yoga, which has truth as its goal, where the identification with the content is totally given up. And the third method is that which allows the consciousness and the content to change each other. The basic premise is that by their very nature, the consciousness and the content influence each other, and we need not try to influence them or exercise any control over them. So, this method suggests a letting go and allow the reality to take over the activity. The reality is usually the personal God whom one loves. This is known as the path of bhakti, where love is the goal. Here, feeling for God, who is the sole doer, is the means to transcend the mind with love as the goal. With love, surrender and sacrifice are so spontaneous that one transcends all mental activity. There is another way, which neither allows the consciousness to change the content, nor the content to change the consciousness, nor is there the mutual change. There is transcendence through the understanding that the seeker is the sought, that thinker is the product of thinking. The seeker takes a quantum leap to transcend mind. Everything is allowed to be as it is. One has to see what is, as J. Krishnamurti used to say. He has put it very eloquently. A river receives everything, the sewer, the corpses, the filth of the cities it passes, and yet it cleanses itself within a few miles. It receives everything and remains itself, neither caring nor knowing the pure from the impure. It's only the ponds, the little puddles that are soon contaminated, for they are not flowing, living, as the wide, sweet-smelling, flowing waters. Our minds are small puddles, soon made impure. It's the little pond called mind that judges, weighs, analyzes, and yet remains the little pool of responsibility. To see what is, the first and the foremost thing one has to learn is to transcend time, because time is mind. To quote J. Krishnamurti again, life is a vast flowing river. Mind holds in its net to things of the river, discarding and holding. That there should be no net. The net is of time and space. It is the net that creates here and there happiness and unhappiness. In this fourth way, the transcendence happens when there is a total non-identification with the content as well as the consciousness, and one just flows by being in choiceless awareness. Obviously, this requires a greater alertness than the other three paths. Whichever path one chooses to tread, depending upon one's aptitude or predisposition, one transcends the mental activity. To illustrate such transcendence, the sage narrates the state Kacha was in. Once, a song burst forth from Kacha, the son of Brahaspati, when he returned from the state of Nirvikalpa Samadhi, or the Samadhi without any vibration, in an exhilarated joy. There is nothing I have to do. There is nowhere for me to go. There is nothing for me to accept and nothing to abstain. Whether I am in the body or out of it, in the Akasha or on the earth, He alone pervades, He alone shines in every being. Such experience is obviously beyond mind, transcending all description. But even then, the experienced wise in all compassion have tried to share their experiences. Their poetic expression has the power to not only point out the state, but even trigger a similar mood in a sensitive seeker. Upanishads and other Vedantic scriptures are filled with such verses, excelling in their poetic expression. Language does not matter much, though Sanskrit used to be the language at that time, which had almost perfected in poetic expression. There is an immortal work in Kannada by Sri D.V. Gundappa entitled Manku Timmana Kagga. Two of its translated verses express the mood Kacha was in. Seeking Brahman in world transactions, seeking Brahman in all jiva forms, feeling Brahman in body and sense experiences. This is the secret of salvation, Mankutimma. Once in garden and then in friends' company, once in music and then in philosophy, once with family and then in silence, experience Brahman, Mankutimma. Whatever the path one chooses, the most important thing she or he has to avoid is the indulgence at the material level and involvement at the physical level. By being always alert and aware, the seeker can succeed in transcendence. It is said of Kacha that he was so unshakable in his resolve that nothing could distract him from his chosen path. Devayani, the daughter of Shukracharya, the preceptor of Asuras as well as Kacha, could not succeed in wooing him. He only looked upon himself as her elder brother and extended all his sympathy and help in later years. All the efforts with involvement like fear only add to the misery when one accidentally gets into the mire of quicksand. The only course open is to be still and unmoving. Similarly, having known that we are involved in the mire of the repetitive world of existence, if one learns to distinguish between the content and consciousness and understand the path suitable for one's growth, one has more than succeeded in making the journey called life into a joyous celebration.